I guess.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Mike Cataldo here. And it's great to be here. Brian reached out to me and asked me a couple months ago or more maybe to do this. And I've been actually doing these kinds of presentations and workshops for a little bit. I was overwhelmed by the amount of interest in it. It started out as sort of an idea, and then it occurred to me that there's a lot of folks out there that want to learn Cypress. So I'm really excited um, and motivated. You know, when you like something and you're not quite sure who's out there in your tribe. It's a mystery, but this has been a pleasure to connect with so many people that are like-minded. So, who am I? Mike Cataldo. I am a lead SDET, so software development engineer and test at a company called 3PL Central, an American fork. 3PL Central makes I actually just started there a couple weeks ago. They make a warehouse management software. So for third-party logistic companies, that's what 3PL stands for, is third-party logistics. And currently, I'm using Cypress to not only build out a suite of tests, but also kind of building a framework for developers to use to empower them to write tests and contribute to the project. A little bit more about me. I prefer to specialize. It's very, very tempting to get into different kinds of different frameworks and programming languages. But I've been kind of a disciple of JavaScript, and I kind of stick to that as much as I can. With all the AI and machine learning out there, Python is very attractive, as well as Go and other languages. But I didn't want to spread myself too thin, so I've kind of dedicated myself to JavaScript and TypeScript as well. I'm kind of opinionated, but I have kind of a no judgment policy. With everybody has their own different situations at work or even on side projects, and so there's going to be differences of opinion and of needs. And so I don't judge people by those by those decisions. There's reasons for using certain languages or frameworks, regardless of how popular or not popular they are. I have kind of a ship good enough policy, meaning I don't believe that QA is like a gatekeeper, and we need to expect the product to be 100% perfect before it ships, because if we don't ship a product, then we don't have satisfied users, and if we don't have users, we don't have income, and if we don't have income, we don't have a job. And I also subscribe to the kind of developer productivity philosophy, meaning that in the organization that I like to be in is a place where developers are supported by the test engineers, as opposed to kind of a develop the product and throw it over the fence to QA. It's going to do all of the kind of manual testing, and it's, I believe, a responsibility of the team to work together, and for the test engineers to support developers and to help them to write tests, and to help them to increase their velocity without affecting quality. I'm also active in the JavaScript community, QA Utah.js, on Slack and in social media, and I'm teaching a weekly workshop through a meetup called Autobots. it's through the QA Utah or QA at the Point meetup, and I'm also a fan of conferences, the Utah JS conference, Open West, and so forth. So today's agenda, part one, this first part here is going to be theory, I guess, and the other part's going to be practical. So we'll talk about kind of who, what, when, where, why, and how of testing. We'll talk about what Cypress is and the pros and cons, some features, and then we'll get into actually demonstrating it, installing it, and you'll have a chance, if you follow along, to write your first test, and of course shed tears of joy because this is a great product. So why do we test? I want to share a story. This is kind of off the cuff, so bear with me here. But in my last job, the developer said, we want you to write end-to-end tests. At the time, they had a good amount of integration and unit tests, but it could have been better. And I said, look, I'm the only QA guy here. And if I start on end to end, it's going to be a nightmare. There's going to be a lot of overhead on my part. Their end-to-end tests are difficult to maintain. They can be flaky. It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole. One breaks and then another one breaks. And you fix one, and another problem just is right around the corner. And so I kind of fought for a few days, tooth and nail, to not get into end-to-end tests, and to really focus on enhancing our unit and integration tests for those reasons. And at the end of the day, I ended up giving in. And the reason why is because they said something to me. They used a word that kind of made my whole argument fall apart, and that's confidence. That's why we test. We test because when we deliver the product, we want to make sure that we want to have confidence in the product that we deliver. So having those end-to-end tests was going to bring the confidence that the team needed to know that their product was going to work. And especially where there were problems that did happen with that sort of connection from the integration of the front end and the back end. This confidence was going to help them with that, to know that when a user actually got in front of the product and started using it, that it was going to run the way that they intended. And that's what end-to-end tests are, is tests that emulate the way a user would use the product. Types of tests, and I'll kind of go through this quickly, and you're certainly welcome at the end to ask more questions about this. But types of tests: unit, component, the smallest bit, the fastest, the least expensive. Right? Integration tests are, you're testing multiple pieces. You might be mocking at this level. They're fast, maybe not as fast, and they are still inexpensive. End-to-end tests, like I was saying before, are that whole tuna. They are more expensive. They are slower. And when I say expensive, I mean there's a lot of resources that are required to maintain those tests. And there's a lot of time that it takes on the build side, with CI/CD. So it's resource intensive there. And then kind of the unsung hero is static analysis. So I'm talking about things like ESLint, linting tools, and things, because if we're adhering to rules that we've agreed on as a development team, we can ensure that the code is as readable and consistent as possible through those rules. And also, if we're using static analysis tools to check our code, that's more time during code review that we can spend really digging into the code. So I kind of love and hate this slide. I see it all the time. It's a very helpful slide, but there's also a lot of debate with this sort of pyramid, right? This test pyramid. It's a very familiar sight, and sometimes I get tired of seeing it, but it is a good illustration. It does illustrate the point, showing the increase in expense when you're testing end to end, as well as the increase in speed as you go lower in the on that pyramid. And of course, with unit tests being the majority, and then service and UI being less and less as you go up. But I believe that this testing trophy is a better illustration. This is a shout out to Kent C. Dodds. He has a great course called at testingjavascript.com, and a fantastic blog, and I highly recommend it. But in this illustration, you can see that that it is a little bit fatter in the middle, and it does include the static testing as well, or the static analysis with the end-to-end integration and unit. So when to test? Now, this I got from Gleb Bamutov. You can see his tag there at the bottom. I ripped this from his slide. He's actually the I think he's the VP of technology or CTO or something like that at Cypress. And this is a great illustration, so I shamelessly ripped it from his slide. But basically, this is kind of the whole software development life cycle, right? Where it starts at planning and then the product is in production. And similarly to the other slides, as you progress, as you get closer and closer to production, the problems that occur there are more expensive. It takes a lot. You have a lot less time to fix problems that are found, in production or get it leading up to production. And at the level that you're coding is the time that that you really should start to write your end-to-end tests. And with Cypress, it actually enables you to do that with the runner. And if you've seen it before, you know what I'm talking about, but we'll see it in a little bit here. So I'm definitely interested in your guys' perspective on this, and so feel free to chime in at the end or in chat. But who's supposed to write and maintain tests? Does it depend on the type of test? Like if it's a unit or integration or end-to-end test, is it only the job of the developers or just the QA team? Or is it both? What are the factors that determine that? I'm really curious. Regardless, the Cypress product enables you, as long as you can write JavaScript, it's possible on either team. And as I showed you before, you can start writing at the time that you're coding, as a developer, but between then and when it actually gets to the user and when it gets to production, you can also write end-to-end tests there as well. So what is Cypress? Now, just a kind of a warning here, maybe not a warning, but something to note is Cypress automates the browser with its own unique architecture. This, by the way, is quoted directly from Cypress. So Cypress automates the browser with its own unique architecture, different from any other testing tool. Now, while this unlocks the power to do things you won't find anywhere else, there are specific trade-offs that are made because there's no free lunch. Many of these boundaries are actually good to have, and in a sense, they prevent you from writing bad, slow, or flaky tests. It's a specialized tool that does one thing really well, which is end-to-end testing web applications while they're under development. So meaning that it's not a this is not a tool that should be used for like scraping, web scraping. There are other tools for that. It shouldn't be used for testing a product that you don't have any control over or you're not developing. Um, it's designed specifically to be part of your development process. Um, so just to kind of get the cons out of the way, this is a JavaScript only framework. There's no support for multiple tabs or windows out of the box. No IE support. Sorry for you guys that have to deal with that IE support, but this isn't there. And of recent, there's now Firefox support and native TypeScript support. This actually, the last one was just recently. I found out just today. I think it was on the 13th that landed for Cypress 4.4.0, I think, the native TypeScript support. And the Firefox support has been huge because it's brought on a lot of people that haven't really been um, able to even consider Cypress because of that lack of Firefox support. And I think just with the Chrome, with Edge getting being based on Chromium, there's Edge support as well. Some challenges, temporary issues that are being worked on. Most of these do have workarounds, but something to keep in mind: hovering, opening new tabs, native or mobile events, file upload download, iframes, shadow DOM, and window.fetch. So if you have needs for these things, you might run into some problems or snags, or you might need to work around it. But I haven't had a need really or rather, I haven't found rather simple workarounds for these things. But it's good to kind of have that, keep that in mind. And the nice thing is, because we kind of got these things out of the way, there's no surprises. So it's all gravy from here. Because Cypress tests run inside the browser, there's things that you can do that you can't do normally. So there's no object serialization or JSON wire protocols. You have native access to everything in the app. It's not possible for Cypress to miss elements, and you always have kind of a handle on the events that are being fired. It's also a clean and intuitive chainable API. In the past, I've used WebDriver IO and Nightwatch. If you guys are familiar with that kind of chainable API, this will feel at home. But jQuery as well, kind of a chainable API with .then promises, stuff like that. That's all in Cypress land. But architecturally, though, they're very different. Cypress is very different architecturally from Nightwatch and WebDriver, and we'll talk about that. So with a nice, clean, intuitive, chainable API, it makes for great readability. And whether it's you in 2 months from now, or someone else looking at your tests, you want to be able to look at a test and know exactly what it's doing. You want to know that we're getting an element, we're typing some things into it, we're pressing enter, and we're making an assertion that something is visible or not visible or what have you. And this is pretty easy, and that's a big deal. Cypress works like a real acts like a real user, and it reads like a real user. Visiting, getting something, clicking on it, and asserting that a URL includes some text is pretty straightforward in a few lines. It also has command retries, native access, resource stubbing, time travel, easy debugging. It's extendable with plugins. We're going to talk about all that here. It has IntelliSense. This is actually great. So if you've ever used, VS Code with IntelliSense, you know what I'm talking about. It makes it really easy because you don't have to go fishing through documentation to find what you need. You can just type sci dot and then have all of your methods right there available. So if you don't remember how to spell it or whatever, if you don't, maybe you know what it starts with, or you're not quite sure you have it right, this is gonna seal the deal for you. And then there's also the method signatures. So the documentation is built right in, so you don't have to. And you can see here, you can actually click on a link that goes to the full documentation, so that you can read up about it. And Cypress has phenomenal documentation. It's the best because it clearly defines what a method does, and it's in a consistent format. It's always up to date, and if you haven't seen their documentation, you're getting into it. Definitely check it out. They have some great guides. So so you have method details right there with examples ready to go right inside your in VS Code. It's often compared to Selenium. I don't want to be a Selenium hater. I definitely don't intend to. Selenium is great. I used to use Selenium. Just for me, like I said before, it's a no judgment policy. If you like and want to continue using Selenium, for a lot of folks, it's actually almost impossible to get out of it, especially if you have a huge, thousands upon thousands of tests and just not you don't have enough resources to get started in Cypress. It makes sense, but I believe that this is actually the future. I think this is going to be the replacement for Selenium in the long term. Fundamentally, architecturally, it differs from Selenium. It's more reliable, and just the way that it runs with your app in the same run loop, it makes it special. It's a huge difference from Cypress, from Selenium, based on that. Because of this architecture, you can take screenshots, you can record videos, you can do file I/O. You have a lot of control over network operations, like intercepting and modifying API calls. That's huge. You also have native access to window, document, any DOM element, obviously, and your application instance, a function, timer, work, service worker. So if you're using, React, for example, and you do debugging, if you've ever debugged your app through, console, through the browser console, you can do those same things within Cypress, within a test, and actually access local storage, or your app store, and you have all of that access to the app and the framework within it. Controlling things like data stores I talked about, stubbing the browser or your app's functions. You can, because you can intercept network requests, you can test things like, let's just say you wanted to fake a bad response from the server. You could send a valid username and password, but then when the server comes back, the real back end comes back with a 200 response, you can actually intercept it, overwrite it with a 500 response, just to see how your application will handle it. And like I kind of mentioned before, you can call functions directly inside of your application. So yeah, accessing everything in your application code and altering any aspect of how your application works, you have access to all of that. So not having to kind of build up state through the UI is huge, because if you have to go through, let's just say you have a form that you want to interact with, rather than have to fill out that form through the UI, which obviously takes time and adds additional complexity to your test, you can actually set up that state programmatically. So before you get to the part where you have to make assertions on the UI, you can say for example, adding to your app store and then bringing up a form, and all of that data it's pulling from the store is already there, as opposed to filling it out manually, or through the UI, I should say. You also have access to the HTTP requests, and you can choose when to, as a result of all of this, you can choose when you want to connect with the real backend and act like a real user, or if there's something that's kind of repetitive or slow, you can replace that logic with the logic to set up your state, or to intercept requests, or to make requests. So as a result of being able to do all of that inside of the browser, you don't have to worry about the network lag, and it goes as fast as your app is capable of rendering, and you don't have to worry about fussing with waits or retries, because Cypress automatically asserts that the app is ready to be interacted with. And that's a huge deal for me, because I don't know about you guys, but I find myself, a lot of times getting tired of fussing around with putting weights in my tests, because the test failed because it said the element wasn't found, when it was there, it just wasn't there at the exact time that it was looking for it. And so the Cypress helps to navigate that. The commands are in a queue. They get queued up first, and then they are executed sequentially. So just like you read it is how it's actually executed, and they can be retried as well. So say for example, you're visiting a page, you're getting an element, and you're clicking on it. When you go to assert that you're on the right page, the way that Cypress works is it will make that assertion, and if it's false, rather than fail immediately, it will actually continue to check, in this case the URL, will continue to check that URL until a specified timeout. I think the default is 4 seconds or something, and you can change that globally or at the command level, but up until that 4 seconds, it will check that, and when it passes, it will pass. But if it gets to that point where it's 4 seconds and the URL hasn't changed, or the URL isn't right, it will fail at that point. So if it's a split second off, Cypress isn't just going to blow up on you, and force you to put in weights to get that figured out, to get that to pass. Oh, and this is the runner. This is very unique to Cypress because it enables you to, as a developer, write your tests, run them in this, runner as you're um, developing, and and if you've ever had to, when something goes wrong, put in, comment out the rest of your code and, run the test again and, see exactly, where the problem is. Because, it fails, but you don't always know, or you can't pinpoint where you went wrong in your test. This time travel essentially is, these are snapshots of the DOM and every point in time. So you can actually hover over each command and on the right see a snapshot of the DOM at that time to see what happens and when, and it gives you a lot of capability around debugging your tests when things go wrong. So like with the case right here, where in this example, there was, like a typo in the test, it actually, shows that there's a failure, and, you can look at where the failure is and debug it right inside of the runner, and then go back into your test, make changes, save it, and then because your test files are being watched, it'll automatically run again, and you can see it pass or fail again, and then you know and then look into it more. But um, this this really helps with that sort of workflow around maintaining and writing tests. So we we kind of gave you a high level overview of Cypress. So now going forward, what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and install Cypress. And if you want to follow along, you're certainly welcome to. And when after we install it, we're going to go ahead and look at the Cypress test runner, and I'll kind of dive into that a little bit more. We'll execute the example tests that come with Cypress. Um, we'll look into the command log and actually write our own test. Now, at this point, what I'd like to do is we'll take kind of a break. If you guys have questions, I'll be on the chat, and you can ask questions. But at this time, I want to use this kind of, we'll say, maybe 5 or 10 minutes to walk through this if you want on your own machines, um, and kind of get started. And then after the break, I'll actually walk through this on my machine, cross my fingers, and hope hope nothing goes wrong. And then we'll kind of go through the rest of these items here. All right, and just in case you missed it, we're stopping at this slide, and so you guys have an opportunity to kind of walk through these steps on your own machine. Basically, you're going to make a directory or go to a directory where you want to um, start the project, and we'll do npm init, and that -y is just for just saying yes to all the prompts that come up. And then npm install save dev or Cypress save dev. And then when you do npx Cypress open, that will or should bring up Cypress for the first time. And then at that point, it sets up all of your structure, folder structure. And I'll be on chat if any of you have questions. And we'll go another maybe five more minutes, maybe more if you guys need longer.
Mike, I've got a question while we're paused.
Go for it.
So you were showing us the step-by-step snapshots, and it takes a DOM snapshot, not just an image.
Right. Yep.
Can you
So
manipulate that and like mess with stuff, or is it that snapshot frozen?
So you can inspect that, and I'm glad you asked that question because I can kind of answer that when we bring up the runner, and I'll show you that. But basically, you can inspect the DOM just like it's the real app. You wouldn't be able to interact with it like it's the real app because it's just a snapshot. It's just a frozen in time kind of thing. But when you have that snapshot, you kind of have the ability to be able to see the DOM and inspect it. Sorry, that's probably just saying the same thing again, but
so you can inspect it, and can you like mess with CSS properties and stuff, and just not
yep,
just the
yeah. So it wouldn't respond to any clicks or anything like that because the DOM doesn't have that logic, but you should be able to modify the DOM and see it
okay,
and see that reflected in the preview on the right.
okay, cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a question from Jason in the chat. Jason, go ahead and just ask, or I can repeat it.
Yeah, so Jason asks, I take it Cypress is just using Puppeteer under the hood. So no, actually, it isn't. Puppeteer is a great is a great product. I've used Puppeteer before, but no, it's not using Puppeteer under the hood. Cypress has their own Chrome driver that they use, and the DOM interaction, a lot of it is built on top of jQuery, which is pretty convenient because it's a popular API, and it doesn't add too much overhead with regards to the tests. So that's best answer I can give for that. All right, we'll give you guys one more minute if you have any more questions, and then we'll move on through the demo.
Seeing a note that you can use Puppeteer with Cypress, would that be a common use case? What's the value there?
So using Puppeteer with Cypress is something that I have heard of. So with Cypress, there's two kind of what would you call it, like run loops or environments. One is actually in the browser and the other is in Node. And you have in your test, you have access to both. So you can actually run, if you wanted to, you could actually run Puppeteer in the Node environment that you have access to. And say you wanted to access some third-party site to get some information, you could write a Puppeteer script to do that, and use that in your tests. For example, I'm not necessarily saying that's the best solution, or the only usage of Puppeteer, but that's how you could use it.
I have another question. This is Jason, by the way. Hey, does this Cypress allow you to do any sort of like mobile app type of testing? Like if you're used to doing like a wrapper app or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in a way it does. So if it's something that you would normally use, if it's a native app, where you want to use to test, like the camera interface, for example, or camera integration, you probably want to use something like Appium. But if you have an application that you can access it through a URL, whether it's wrapped, for mobile use or not, if you can access it through a URL and it's responsive, you can actually configure Cypress to a viewport size, and you can specify devices. So say I wanted to test my application, the way that it looks on an iPhone, I can specify that, and in the runner you can actually see it kind of running in an iPhone size. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. All right, so let's go ahead and and actually walk through this here. So I'm going to pull up my code editor here. Let's see. Come on. Oh, I see. I've got this in full screen, so I think that's why it's not showing it. In fact, I don't know if I'm showing the application or if I'm showing the screen here. Let's see. Can you guys see my VS Code window?
No, you might have been sharing just the window instead of the whole screen.
Okay, let me see if I
Pause
can
and share
change that
again.
here. Okay. Okay, I think I got it now.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. So I'm literally doing this from scratch here. So don't judge. Let's see. It's harder than it looks. Let's see here. Where's my terminal? There we go. All right. Okay. Let's just say CD and we'll do I'll make a directory. I'll make a new one. All right, and then we'll do npm init -y. Okay. And then can't remember if I can do this. No, I can't. That's okay. I'll just do it this way. Here we go. All right. So now I've got the package JSON that's created by that process. Bring up my terminal again. All right. So now we want to do npm install Cypress --save dev. Okay, and that's going to install Cypress as a dev dependency. I'm glad my internet is not too slow here. And then once that installs for the first time, you actually have a cached binary. So I believe the version that I have on my machine is different than the latest version of Cypress. So yeah, so when you're downloading a version for the first time, it does all this this long download, but after that, any installs we'll just pull that from cache. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got my package and package lock and node modules created from that. But it's not until I run npx Cypress open that it creates the structure for me. So I'm going to bring this window in. So this is what you should see when you run npx Cypress open. It says here to help you get started. We have some examples that we put in there, and there's your examples. So to run a test is pretty simple. You can just click on it, and I'll bring this into view here. And here's the runner. Now, let me go back. You can see at the top right here of this window, it says running in Electron 80. So that's the default. I can actually stop it and select Chrome 80 and run that, and it'll actually bring up a Chrome instance. It's the one that's installed on my machine. So it uses that. It doesn't interfere or have the other Chrome windows that I might have open don't have any effect on it. It's a totally different session, but it does use Chrome. It disables all of the plugins and things like that that are running within Chrome. So to stop, you can hit stop. You can configure Cypress. It actually shows you what configuration's being used. The reason why is because there are different ways that you can configure it. You can either use a Cypress.json file, or you can use when you actually run the command in the terminal, you can throw in configuration that way. You can specify a separate file. You can use environment variables. You can even set them from a plugin. And so what Cypress does in this window is it essentially says, okay, of all the configuration, the ways that you can configure it, this is the final kind of configuration that we assume you want. So that way, if you do set configuration incorrectly or whatever, you can kind of come in here and debug that, and that's kind of nice. I mentioned before that with timeouts, you can actually configure those on a global level, and that's where you would do that here. So let me see where that is. Like, for example, page load timeout, default command timeout, that 4 seconds that I was referring to before. You can set those kinds of things in here. You can even set the folder, the default folder for fixtures and plugins and your tests and things like that in your configuration. You can run all your specs from here as well. I don't recommend it. It's easier, but probably better to run Cypress run. So I'll kill this here real fast, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if you do npx Cypress run, so instead of open, it actually just runs it all inside terminal. So if you were to run your tests in a CI environment, that's the command that you would use. And as you can see here, it's a different interface. It's just your vanilla terminal reporter that shows you the results of that. You even have links here to the videos at the end that you can actually click on inside the terminal and see the video of, say, like if there's a failure, you can see the video of the failure. So that's kind of helpful. If I kill this here, I can actually do run and do -- headed. And then it should, yeah. And then it shows the essentially view into the browser that would normally be running headless. So that's that. Let's go back to open. By the way, you can specify browser as well when you do npx Cypress open. You could do -- browser and specify a different one. But that's for another show, I think. Let's go ahead and bring up this actions one. And you can see here that, you know what? Let me actually show you the code, and then I'll come back to that. and maybe show you side by side so you can kind of see how the code is written and how that is reflected in the runner. So if we go to Cypress and then go to integration and go to actions, and okay, so one thing to point out, this reference types equals Cypress is just a TypeScript directive that essentially tells VS Code where the or how to get the IntelliSense. You don't have to do it this way. There are other ways to do this, but just wanted to point that out. That if you did want IntelliSense in your test, quick way to do that is just this triple slash directive. Okay, so here in the first context, by the way, this is using Mocha and with Chai style assertions. In another workshop, we can get a little bit more into that. But if you're familiar with Mocha, this is going to feel right at home. So within this context, we have this before each. In the before each, we're visiting this example site. And then inside the test, we're testing the type command. And we're getting an element, we're typing in an email, and we're asserting that that it has this value. So let's go here, let's go to actions, and let's look at that. Okay, now let's just say a little tip if you're not familiar with Mocha, you can actually do only. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now, because there's a watcher, it automatically reruns the test. And with the dot only, it only runs this one test. So here are the commands, and this is what the DOM snapshots look like. Now, if I'm not hovering over anything, this is the real application, just the way that it is at the end of the test. And I can, click on things. I'm not going to, but I can interact with the application. If I click on this, this is a snapshot. So I can't interact with it, but I can, for example, go to inspect, and I can actually, just like your application, I can go in and inspect the DOM elements. And you know what? Just for kicks, I'm gonna try. I'm totally gonna wing this, guys. I am going to see if I can change something. Let's see. How about if I remove this class? Let me do that. Can I do that? Well, that doesn't really show anything. Let's see. Give me a suggestion, guys. What should I do? Should I set, what is it, like hidden to true or something like that? I forgot. See, I get spoiled, guys. So I don't know these things. Oh, is it disable an input? Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, this input right here. Let's see, go to inspect, and then let's see, like disabled equals true. Can I do that? Can I do that? There we go, and it's disabled. Good suggestion. So to answer the question from before, Brian, I think it was that asked me. Yes, you can monkey around with the DOM, and it is reflected in there. Now, of course, this is a snapshot, right? So if I uncheck that or click on that again, this is not disabled anymore. This is the real app. This is the way that it works normally. Let's see if it saved it. Oh yeah, so it does actually persist that change. So that was a fun little exercise. Now, of course, hovering and clicking are different things here. When you click on it, it actually stays. If you just hover, it just shows you. Now, let me see. Something else to note here is that when you are hovering over on the right, it does actually highlight the specific DOM. Also, there is a before and after, which is kind of fun because now you can say, okay, after, hold on, that's not exactly what I expected. So I'm not sure because yeah, so it works there. So essentially, if I type this, that's what it looks like before, and after the command is executed, that's what it looks like after. Oh, I see. These aren't actually things that are typed. These are just keys, not text. Okay, so that makes sense why I didn't see anything on the front end. All right, great. And then assertions, you can see them pass or fail there. And these are collapsible. You can restart the test and also stop it. So I can stop it right there and see what it looks like. I can refresh that there. And let me use this playground. So the selector playground is actually pretty convenient. So I can type in, so right now it has sci.get body. And as you can see, the whole body is highlighted. But if I type in action dash email, it shows that specific thing selected. And then what I can do here is I can do copy to clipboard, and I'll go back to VS Code. And let's just say, I wanted to put it here. I just Command V, and there it is. Okay. So that makes it super convenient. The other thing that you can do too is you can say print to console. Whoops, let me bring the console back up. You do print to console, and it gives you some extra information about it. So this is the command, and this is what it's going to yield. When a command yields something, essentially they call it the subject, and that is what is passed to the next thing, the next command that's chained to it. So in this case, we do sci.get, and then .type is what we're chaining. So it's taking what's yielded and it's passing it to the type, which is a child command that takes an element as its input, and then this then yields to the should and so forth. So that's what that yielded means. This actually shows the viewport settings. So if you had different viewport selected, the app would obviously look different. It would be a different size. Doing this is just zooming in and out. It's not changing technically changing the viewport, but this is what it's set to here. And through sci.viewport, you can change that. What else did I want to show? Oh, and this is cool too. So you can actually click on this, and then let me see, and then select, say like a field like this, and then it puts the selector in there for you. And then of course you can then use copy to clipboard and put it right in your test. So that's super convenient as well. So we talked about, go back to go back here. So I see there's a question in the chat, and I'll get to that in a second. So we talked about Cypress high level. We installed Cypress. We looked at the test runner. We executed an example test, and we looked at the command log. Before we write our test, let's go ahead and field your questions here. Let's see. So. So Christian asks, can you run multiple instances concurrently on different parts of your test suite? I don't believe that you can, not just out of the box, because this is, you can run it in a terminal. You could have different. You could. I mean, theoretically, you could have different containers that have browsers inside of them. I don't know that you can use the same browser. I haven't actually tried it. I know Cypress has a kind of parallel feature, parallel test feature that's part of their paid product, but I haven't had a whole lot of experience with running tests concurrently. Also, with running tests concurrently, I've also, when I did want to run my tests concurrently because I wanted to speed things up, I've kind of used that as an opportunity for me to write better tests. If I found that it was taking too long, rather than dare I say, cop out and run tests in parallel to make them faster, I kind of challenge myself to like I said, write more efficient, faster tests. Not going through the UI when I could help it. Maybe going through the API or what have you. Or when it was appropriate, mocking things out, things like that you can do to speed up your tests. And another comment here, I think the playground selector is great to make sure Cypress is going to find what you're using as a selector, and it is unique, multiple instances of Cypress. So yeah, for sure. It's definitely a unique tool, and something that I wish I had with Selenium. I think there is like a browser extension of some kind that I used years ago that helped with selectors, finding selectors and things like that and testing them out. I don't recall the name or anything, but it wasn't nearly as helpful as this, that's for sure. There's a Selenium product called Cataldo Studio, I think is what it's called, that I've used before. They have some neat tools around that. Any other questions? We'll actually take a quick. I'm going to take a quick water break, and if you guys have any questions, go ahead and bring them up in the chat. I'll let you know when I'm back at my seat. Just a moment.
While he's out, I'm going to take just a second. I mentioned before I was going to raffle off some gift cards. There's not really a great way for me to do that without pulling down the entire user list, which I don't know that we necessarily want to put in the video. So I've posted the link to our Twitter account, which is just coding SLC. So if you guys want to hit me up with a message there, I'll just pick the first 4 or 5 or whatever, and send you guys a gift card.
Go, go, go.
Exactly.
Get that gift card.
It's just the awkward moment where you don't have a Twitter account.
Oh man.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to work around that either, because I was gonna I was going to say, how about the Slack channel? But I don't know that everybody's on there. So I'll have to figure out something that's compatible with Meet because it's a lot easier in person.
What about webcam rock paper scissors?
Didn't quite catch that.
A webcam rock paper scissors?
You know, we could do that. Actually, that sounds fun. Should we have a championship? Rock, paper, scissors bracket. Anybody want to try that?
I don't know I've ever tried 21 way rock, paper, scissors.
We could do rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, but that still doesn't get us there.
No.
Very true.
You could do something like think of a number and everyone put a number in, and whoever's closest, we do it.
We could try that too.
You see, this person is the smartest one in this room.
Sure, let's do that. Number between 1 and 100. We'll do one of them that way. Hey, points for 42 because it is the answer to everything. All right, everybody got their entry in? 10, 9, 8, 5, Bueller. Still one or two trickling in. All right. It was in fact 72, so good job, Spencer. I guess I don't know how to post your, don't want you to post your email for the video, so if you want to hit me up on the Slack channel or on Twitter or some other method if you don't have one of those.
I can hit you up on Slack.
Okay. I'll go look for you unless you find me first.
Wow, he got the number exactly right, huh?
Yep. It's a good shot.
I don't know. That sounds fishy to me.
I don't know, Spencer, if that helps, although there's actually some really interesting research around and party tricks around probability and, you know, guessing how big of a group you need before people have the same birthday, things like that. And
Yeah.
much smaller than you'd think intuitively.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, are you back? Are we ready to go, or should I come up?
Yep, I'm ready to continue here.
Okay, carry on.
All right. So let me go back here. So we kind of did a high level overview of Cypress. We installed it. We looked at the test runner and the example tests and what an execution looks like, and looked at how the command log works and how the time travel aspect of it with the DOM snapshots works. So now, and we also looked at some other aspects of the runner. We looked at the selector playground, and we kind of played around with the DOM and saw that you can actually make changes, and it's reflected on the runner. That was fun. So let's go ahead and write our first test. Now, I mentioned before that Cypress is designed to test your own application in development. So just as kind of a warning here that this is not normally how you'd want to do it, but I am going to have kind of a sort of take-home challenge, if you will, for pulling down a project and writing a test for it. But for for the sake of time and for simplicity, we're just going to go ahead and use the same project that we have and write a test. So to start, we're going to visit a website, and we're going to query for an element. We're going to interact with that element, and we're going to make an assertion about the content on the page. So we'll walk through this together, and we're going to try to use these basic commands. We're going to visit. We're going to do a site.visit, a site.get, site.contains, site.click, and a should, which is the assertion. And we'll look at how it passes, but we'll also look at a failure as well, and maybe try to debug it if we run into a problem. Now, to kind of to challenge myself and to kind of make this interesting, let's go ahead. I'm totally making this up as I go, by the way, guys. I want to use the chat as a suggestion, as a place to get suggestions. So kind of like the whose line is it anyway, or improv. I want to hear audience suggestions, and so let's go ahead and try to get a web page to go to visit, and not Google, by the way. I've already tried. It's difficult to interact with their page, believe it or not. But let's go to a page and start there. Bing.com/COVID. All right. Okay. Now let me go to my screen that you can see here. Now, normally what I'd want to do, kind of thinking out loud, okay, is I want to actually go to the page. So I would go to, not necessarily in this runner browser, by the way, I just happen to be using this one, but we're going to go to bing.com/COVID. And I want to see what it looks like. So kind of look at it, manually, and kind of think about what I want to test. So now we're at this COVID-19 tracker. What should we, so going back to here, okay, we're going to visit the site. Give me an element, and you don't have to give me the the selector or anything, but give me an element to interact with. So I thought I heard something about United States. Okay, so click on this United States button. All right, cool. Let's see. I click on that. So again, I'm just kind of looking at how the app works manually. Okay, so obviously there's some changes here, right? So I click on this. What should I assert when I click on United States?
Should be 0.
Should be 0. Maybe even Utah next. Oh, I see. All right. And then, wait, how are these sorted? Oh, they're sorted. I see. They're not sorted alphabetically. Am I just blind or what? I don't see Utah. Oh, there it is. Okay. I click on Utah, and then that shows that it's about 2,500. All right. So how about I click on, unless I get a better suggestion, how about I click on United States, and I'll go back to that step and assert that it says United States here, and then we'll scroll down. We'll have to scroll to find it, and we'll scroll to Utah, and we'll click on that, and there it is, and we'll assert that this is Utah here. How about that? So now I'm going to go to my editor. So now what I'm going to do here is inside integration, I'm going to create a new one, and we'll call it covid.spec.js. Guys, I'm literally just winging it here. So this is good. I'm going to put in that that / directive. Okay. I'll just copy that, put it here. Okay. And then we'll do context, and we'll say COVID page, Bing COVID page. Okay. All right. And then we'll do it. And then we'll say country and state selection. And then we'll say sci.visit. And then what was the bing.com COVID. All right. Now, I could put the rest of the test in here, but the way that I like to do it, the way that I suggest doing it is, by the way, we're going to put a dot only here. Oops. That way this runs. Let me take the only off of this one. Okay. And we'll go back to here. Now we see, I'm going to stop that. You see we have this COVID. Anyway, I don't know if I finished my thought before, but basically I like to start with the first step and just kind of see what happens. Make sure everything works as I intended. And so here we are. So we ran that, we visited, and the page came up. Seems to be good. So that's good. Let's go ahead and before we click on United States, how about we make sure that it says global here? So normally we could use this selector or we could inspect it. Let's see what happens when we click on this. So location title. So that's perfect. So now I'm going to say copy to clipboard. Good job, Microsoft, for designing it that way instead of some crazy, getting some crazy selector there. So now we could do this, paste it, get location title. Okay. Dot should. Now I want to see, whoops, an example. Okay, so dot should, and then I can say, for example, I could say contain, and then that. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna use that example, contain, and global. All right, I'm gonna save that and see what happens. Something that I failed to mention here before is in the runner, it actually shows you all of the network requests that it's tracking, and you can actually change this if you wanted to have a lot more. Say like if you wanted to track all the analytics and things like that, but it's just gonna it doesn't track. It basically just tracks API XHR requests. So if you had, like text files that were being downloaded or HTML or other, static things, it's not going to track those by default. But you can override it. But the nice thing is that you can see what's actually happening with regards to network requests. And you can, we won't talk about that today because of time, but you can actually wait on these things. You can put in waits if you needed to wait for a certain request to go through before proceeding. You can do that. Okay, so moving along. So we visited the site. If I click on that, I can see this is what it looks like upon visit, and then I got the the location title, and then asserted that it was it said global, and that passed. So that's good. So now I want to I want to click on. Let me get out of that. So I want to click on the United States. So I'm going to bring this back up, and I'm going to click United States. There we go. And I'll copy this. How easy is this, guys? All right. And then we get the United States, and then we do dot. No, wait. Sorry. Click. We're going to click on it, and let's save it and see if this happens the way we expect. So that went by fast. So now I can hover and actually see it happening here. So we did that, and we did get, and we clicked on it, and then let me see what happened after I clicked on it. All right, and it brought up United States, so that's good. So we saw before, after, and it changed to that. I'm gonna get out of that. So now I want to assert that this says United States. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna click on this, go here again, location title, and I'll do copy. So now I'm gonna say location title, and then dot should contain United States. And I'm going to save that, and let's just make sure it works. Looks good. Let's go Utah. So we'll scroll down here. It was like 2000 something, right? No, wait. Here it is. Okay. So click on this, and it's Utah, United States. Easy peasy. All right. This might fail, but let's see. I'm going to save it and see what happens. Okay. So the reason why I said this might fail was because I wasn't quite sure if Cypress was going to scroll to that element to click on it, but it did do that. And that's the nice thing about Cypress is it won't necessarily require you to do that. It will do it. It will actually scroll to that place just like a real user does. It's not just going to click on it, just applying, a click on that as part of the DOM. It's actually going to bring it into view and then click on it, if that makes sense. And that's what a user would do. So we click on it, and then after we click, we say, I'm just going to go ahead and guess and say sci.get location type. Let me see. Location title. Yeah, that's what it was before. I'm going to assume it's the same, and then do .should and contain and Utah, right? All right, let's go ahead and save that. See what happens. And our test passes. Everything looks good. Let's see what happens when it fails. So let's just say I said titles by accident. Okay, so you can see here for a little while, it actually did look for it. And then it said, oh, we timed out retrying, expected to find this, but never found it. We never found the location, the element with location titles class. So that looks like. So now I can say, okay, let's just say I was none the wiser, and I saw that this failed. I can hover over, I can click on it, and I can say, what the heck happened here? It says here that, let me see, what if I put in, location titles? Oh, wait a minute. Oh, there's my mistake. I had a typo. So now I've got it right. Now I can, copy it, or I can go to the test and correct it. And then I'll just go ahead and save. And then it's watching the test or watching the file. And now it passes, everything's good. Cool. Any questions?
Would you include your test specs in with the repository that they're testing, or would you keep this in a separate repository?
That's a good question. And it's actually something that I've debated a couple of times. It really depends on your team and what your needs are. I would say if the advantage of keeping them as part of, so in the examples in the Cypress documentation, it's in the same repo. Mm-hmm. And the advantage of doing that is your tests and your app are released at the same time, right? Or deployed at the same time. There's no out of sync, because if you do fall out of sync, what you end up having is an app that has the wrong tests, that the tests aren't kept up with the app, or vice versa. And so that can kind of complicate things there, and then there's a little bit of extra communication to say, okay, I'm going to, are you going to master with, or going to production with, these changes? Because I'm going to go to production with these, with these tests or something, and so having it part of the same, repo is a good idea in that sense. Having it separate may make sense if you're testing maybe multiple repos. I don't know why you do that, but I'm just kind of thinking, shooting off the hip here, but you know, there's that. There's also if there's some restriction with regards to, you know, control over the repo. In other words, if you know, if essentially you can't get permission to you know, push changes to the application repo for one reason or another, you might want to keep it separate. If you're kind of doing this as sort of a trial to kind of see how things are going, and maybe, you know, there's too much risk with you know, with making changes. Again, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip, but I would say unless there's a reason not to, I would default to it being part of the same repo as your app.
Is there convention for differentiating your Cypress tests from, like, say, Jest tests, so you don't get the two suites running concurrently, or is that just up to the implementers?
So I'm not quite sure I understand your question, but I can tell you for sure that there is at least by default, there's a Cypress folder, and that's where all your tests would live.
So you're not putting them in with you're not putting them like, let's say that you're doing Angular, right? Like Angular likes to have it next to its components. You're not going to be putting them next to the components like your Angular tests. So you can be more surgical about how you're running your tests. You don't have to worry about accidentally running a bunch of Cypress tests when you're trying to run Jest tests or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Now, you could use Cypress to test individual components, and then that might make sense. But if you're using Cypress purely for end-to-end tests, I don't think it would make sense to put them in with the same you know, in the same directories as at the component level, because you're not testing components. You're testing you know, paths that a user would take, or you're testing you know, whole features as opposed to, you know, individual components. If you were to use Cypress to test components, which you can, you could do that. You could put them in the same folder, and then just the way that you name the file, you can actually, whether it be on the Jest side or the Cypress side, you know, you could say, you know, in my case, I have covid.spec.js. I could you know, rename this to spec.e2e.js, and it would run just fine. And then I could specify with Jest not to,
Right.
you know, to exclude those, right?
Yeah.
So, and then with Cypress, I kind of saw a comment in the corner of my eye. I think I know what they were saying, but with Cypress, you'd have to specify where your tests are located. So, and that's pretty easy. It's just in your Cypress JSON that you'd have to override it to say, don't look for it in Cypress, look for it in the project root. So, or the app directory or what have you. So, good question. Any other questions? All right, while you guys are kind of stewing that, any, you know, questions that you might have, we'll kind of recap. So we were able to use visit get. We actually didn't use contains, but that's okay. You guys could try that on your own. I kind of forgot about that, but we did watch, you know, how a test can pass or fail. We talked a little bit about the Mocha syntax, and we were able to use we use context, but describe is synonymous, and the it method as well. Just to, you know, kind of general pattern that you might see with tests, with tests like the one we just did, is essentially you have three phases: setting up the application state, taking an action, making an assertion about the resulting application or application state. Or another way is like given, when, then, or arrange, act, assert. So we did all that. As in a future meetup, or as another one of these workshops, some of the things that we could go over a little bit more are talking a little bit more about page events. We did talk about these: time travel, before after snapshots, pin snapshots, event hitbox. Event hitbox is essentially when you click on an item, it actually shows you where on the item it clicked on. I actually didn't show you that, but we could talk more about that in page events, and we did talk about console output. We did not talk about special commands like pause and debug. Some other things in a future meetup, we could talk about SPI stubs, clocks, fixture data, alias routes, custom commands, controlling the network traffic, taking screenshots and video, integrating with a CI/CD tool, and Docker, and other advanced configuration. That I kind of talked a little bit about configuration, but also extending with plugins as well. Now, kind of going back, because we're running up on time here, and I want to leave time for questions, but this is kind of a take-home challenge for you, and I'll share this. I'll share this with you on the Slack, this presentation. But as kind of a take-home challenge, what you could do is clone the to-do MVC project, and I have my own fork of it that you can use. But to-do MVC is an open source project that is basically it's a to-do app that's implemented in different JavaScript frameworks. MVC stands for Model View Controller. And just kind of an overview. We're not going to go through, we're not going to step through this, but basically what you would do is you'd clone this. This is my fork of the Cypress example to do MVC. And essentially, I have a few different branches on that. In this example, it's week 3, but I also have a week 1 and week 2. And essentially, you just clone that and go to the directory, and then open it up in like VSCode or something. And after you run npm install, there's a script in there for called npm start, and then you can just, and that starts the application. It starts the to-do MVC app at localhost, and then you can from there run tests. So there's actually a Cypress folder in there with some example tests in it, depending on the branch that you check out. But yeah, I would suggest, if you want to try this out on your own, just follow these instructions, clone the project that I have up on there on GitHub, and start the app and play around with it and see how it goes. In the workshop that I'm doing on a weekly basis, I actually go through all of this. In fact, let me back up here. Oh crap, I don't have that other. Let me see if I can find it. I have another presentation. I can just kind of show you some examples of things that I do. In the workshops. Hang on just a moment. let's see, how about this one? All right, so let me see here. So this is another. These are some slides from another one of my workshops, and these are some of the challenges that that I give as part of the workshop. So setting the base URL config, using before each, writing custom commands for the to-do app. What else? And that was all that was for this particular one. I've got this one too. So here's another one. This is just to kind of give you an idea of the kinds of things that I talked about. So structuring your test, interacting with the DOM, command options. We haven't really talked about that. I also dig into making assertions and the Chai API. And I talk about test item potency, which is essentially making sure that your tests are, that they run the same no matter when or how many times you run the test. Things like that. I kind of dig into those things, and I give challenges that build on the things that were learned that day or whatever. It's a free thing. I'm not selling anything. It's a free thing that I do with the QA at the Point meetup. So if you're interested, just ping me and I can give you the information of that. And I created a new channel on the Utah.js Slack called Cypress, of course. So feel free to join that and ping me if you have Cypress questions. But yeah, like I said before, I'm pretty active in the community. So don't be shy. Yeah, that's it. Follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, find me on Slack. Like I said, that's all I've got. And if you guys have questions, go ahead.
Not to cut anybody off, but that was great. Thanks, Mike. I learned a bunch about that. We are gonna post.
Welcome. Have fun.
If anybody has questions, go ahead, and I'll put something up on the Slack later when I've got a link to the video.
Is this an open mic question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. Since I know some people in here are actually pretty brand new to automation, and especially Cypress, is there a benefit to starting automating with Cypress versus starting with Selenium, and what can give you more of a base knowledge when it comes to the overall QA side of things?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Thank you for asking that. So let me back out of my thing here. So one of the things that I said before is with Cypress is they have phenomenal documentation. Now, with their documentation, not only do they have docs on the API like contains, for example, and they talk about that, but they also have guides. And so with their guides, they essentially kind of go through a lot more than your average Joe as far as how to use it. So in other words, the documentation teaches you best practices. So if you're new to automation, Cypress is really great because you not only learn how to use it, but you learn how to write great automation, and you learn what good automation is. So yeah, that's my thought on that.
Yeah, thank you for taking time to answer that question.
Mhm. And I know, we're kind of putting you on the spot, at the end here with questions. I know for me, sometimes they don't come to me until, the next morning in the shower or something. No, I mean, once you're playing around with it, you're digging in. You're certainly gonna come up, you're gonna run into a snag or you're gonna have a question, and um, that's why I set up that Slack channel. So when you guys are trying this on your own, if you're really serious about getting into it, you should try it on your own, whether it be on the To Do MVC app or on your own. The whatever product you're working on as part of your day job, but you're going to run into snags. So don't feel pressure to ask here. You can ask anytime, and there's a great community as well. So I guess if there's nothing else, guess that's it. Brian, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that was it. Other than if you want to post or at least send me some links to your other stuff where we can find more, I'll put those up with this video description, and people can track you down when they want more stuff.
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah, for sure.
All right, well,
Yep, that's it. And like I said, I'll post the slides so you'll have that for reference. And as over time, I'm just going to have more and more content and presentations and things like that, and I'll be posting things through Slack and Meetup and Twitter and so forth. So keep you guys posted. All right.